today. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for some meditation now, and we'll sit for meditation for about 45 minutes. So in order to befriend our body, we begin by settling ourselves into whatever comfortable sitting position we've chosen. Adjust ourselves until we find the right posture that will allow us to be comfortable throughout our meditation practice. And we take a deep breath to ourselves, all the way in, before exhaling fully out again. Breathing our deepest breath, the cool, refreshing winter air, and breathing slowly and smoothly out again. Because it's said that we can find peace in our lives not by rearranging the circumstances of our life, but by realizing who we are at the deepest level. So in this respect, we slowly gather our attention back to our body and feel the outline of our body in space, creating an awareness of our body as a whole. We might notice where our body connects with the surfaces that support us. We might notice where our body feels solid and grounded, and where it feels open and light. And at this point, if we feel ready, we can gently close our eyes. And we might check in with the thinking part of our mind, noticing whether our mind is busy or whether it is quiet. We just notice whatever's there with a compassionate, non-judgmental attitude. We might check in also with the feeling, emotional parts of the body, the heart, the gut, the face and throat, noticing what emotions we find there. And we see if we can bring an interest to our experience without getting caught up in it. We allow our eyes, gaze to soften until it's nothing more than a vibrant energy. And from there we slowly move our awareness to our forehead, relaxing the muscles there, the top of our head, the whole of our head, and our neck muscles, relaxing them all completely. We allow the sense of relaxation to move on down through our shoulders, upper arms, elbows, forearms and wrists. We might notice any sensations in the palm of our hands. At first on the surface, then deeper down into the muscles, bones and joints. Also becoming aware as we relax our chest, the space around our heart, our belly. We soften the entire front of our body before allowing the relaxation to flow down through our shoulder blades, upper and lower back, down through our legs, to the soles of our feet and our toes. Until we feel the whole of our body softening, as if it were composed of nothing but energy. We might take note of any feelings of balance and peace arising from the practice so far. And equally, the feeling inside us is something we need to relax further in preparation for the meditation ahead. So we let go just for a few moments of all the normal worries and concerns we associate with our everyday life. If there are any urgent things, we try to put them on one side for now. Perhaps with the promise to ourselves that we can come back to think about them at a later time. We try not to dwell on any regrets from our past, while also avoiding the temptation to make plans for the future. Being very much in the here and now, as the present moment is the only place in our lives that we can really make a difference. So we try to focus on the task in hand, gathering our attention back from any possible distractions in the outside world to a place of peace and serenity that lies inside us. Generally, the best place is somewhere around the area of our stomach. And by maintaining our attention inside us, it will help our mind to absorb the positive energies of the inner world. At the same time, although we may be aware of what's going on around us, we may find that what's going on outside doesn't actually perturb our mind anymore. Instead, our mind absorbs the positive qualities from the inside, a sense of happiness and joy, as if our whole mind were filled with tiny particles of happiness and joy, which grow and spread to feel the whole of our body and mind. And when we feel relaxed both in body and in mind, very gently, using no effort at all, we allow our attention to settle and to center to a point at the middle of our stomach, as if at the center of ourselves was just an empty space. We maintain our attention at the center of the body, observing as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, keeping our mind always at the center of whatever arises there, at the center of a bright sphere of light, with a feeling that there's a meditation object floating inside at the center of ourselves. Gradually allowing the mind to quieten down until there are no remaining thoughts in the mind anymore. The mind can come to what's known as a standstill at the center of the body. And if thoughts still recur in the mind, if they don't seem to go away when we ignore them, then we might make use of that traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, with the sound of the mantra coming up from the center of the inner object. The sound of the mantra being soft, tender and soothing to the mind, until within our mind only two things remain: the inner object shining brightly and the sound of the mantra Samma Arahang coming up from the center of the inner object. We repeat the sound of the mantra in a gentle, unhurried way, effortlessly. Repeating the mantra for as long as we need to, until at a certain point the mantra will fade away of its own accord. And if we start to feel that the mind is calm and doesn't wander anymore, then there's no need to start with the mantra again. We just rest the awareness at the center of our inner object. If we notice the inner object is drifting away into random thoughts, we just gently bring it back to the center of the inner object as before. Cultivating the mind to become calmer and calmer. The longer we can rest the mind gently at the center of the body, the more refined our mind will become. Little by little becoming calmer, more refined, softer, more peaceful. So we cultivate the peacefulness of the mind in this way at the center of ourselves for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Meditation is unique in the way it provides us with the inroad to happiness that can stay with us in the long term, in contrast to the way most people live their lives. Because in general, people find themselves just moving from one distraction to the next. It's only when we can free ourselves from distractions that we can start to become aware of all the thoughts that used to be there in the background all along. And it's those thoughts racing around in the mind that leave us feeling frazzled at the end of the day. Not that there's anything wrong with relaxing by watching TV, listening to music, going to the mall, or hanging out with friends. Although these things can be enjoyable in the short term, they may just serve as temporary distractions instead of providing sustainable space for the mind. But what we notice is that the moment we finish any of these activities, the previous thoughts and feelings will just come flooding back again, if not with the same intensity, then they will still be there in the background nonetheless. Even when we're asleep at night, it may feel as if the cogs in the mind just keep on turning. So it's no coincidence that stress has increased in proportion to the degree of complication in our lives. But even though we may realize that our mind is held hostage by the convenience of modern technology, instead of trying to avoid it or change it, we need to look at how we can relate to it skillfully and not feel overwhelmed. And this is where the importance of training the mind comes in, of maintaining contact with this underlying sense of fulfillment and happiness on the inside, no matter what's happening in our lives. It can make a profound difference. And this is why through meditation we can really start to take a weight off our mind. Training in mindfulness doesn't require us to change anything, but it's in becoming increasingly aware of our own mind that we may find we choose to make some changes in our external life, but that's completely up to us. There's no need to give everything up or radically change our lifestyle in any way, because dramatic changes like this are rarely sustainable anyway. But by adopting a more mindful way of living, it allows us to integrate what we have with a slightly more profound way of seeing the world. We can keep living as we've always done if that's what we want. But through mindfulness we can learn how to change our experience of that lifestyle. It's about finding a way to live as we are, but with an underlying sense of fulfillment. But for as long as we're immersed in our own thoughts the whole time, it's very difficult to develop the presence of mind that we need. So we continue to train ourselves at the center for a few more moments now, until we come to time for some loving kindness meditation. now that our mind and the sense of peace energy within us start to become unified, we continue to maintain our awareness at the center of ourselves. Continue to remain in that ocean of peace energy while we slowly open our eyes and prepare ourselves to light the candles for the full moon meditation today. So now is the time for us to illuminate the world by lighting the little candles that we've prepared, feeling that the candlelight is radiating outwards warm and bright, as if the candles symbolize our inner light, our peace energy, and our positive intentions this evening. To keep our mind on track at the center of our body the whole of the time. If we find our mind slipping away onto other things, each time we realize, we just bring our mind back again to the center of our body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can conjure up a new one. But if it changes, we just follow and observe the way in which the inner object transforms, with no need to change it back again. And at this point, we can pick up on the inner experience we have attained as the result of the meditation so far this session. We draw upon the inner experience at our center, whether it be a sense of well-being on the inside, a sense of illumination, to generate the emotion of compassion and loving kindness within us. At this point, we can imagine ourselves casting forth loving kindness as a beam of healing light in a particular direction, as if while sitting in meditation we extend this particular emotion of loving kindness out limitlessly, beyond any kind of barrier, so that we're not limiting ourselves to any particular part of the world, or any particular sort of being, or any particular sort of person. Just extending loving kindness limitlessly in all directions, so that we think of ourselves as extending loving kindness to the whole world, sharing all of this deep positivity from our inner experience. Just as a mother fully empathizes with the suffering of all her children, in the same way one should develop towards all beings the feeling of being a parent to the whole world, with empathy for the suffering of all. A state of mind without boundaries, and toward the whole of the world. We emanate loving kindness as a state of mind without boundaries, above, below, and all around, unconfined, without enmity, without adversaries. We extend loving kindness outward in an unbounded way, so that rather than thinking about the world in terms of friends and enemies, we think about the entire world in a friendly way, making it more profound in a certain kind of deep emotional sense. At the same time, we might gently bring to mind something along the lines of, may I be well and happy, may I be free from suffering. Almost like a sort of mantra, because it's true that deep down the person dearest to us is ourselves. Consequently, we should never harm anyone because each of us holds ourselves dear. None of us want to be harmed. Which you could say is enlightened self-interest in its spiritually purest form. So we start our loving-kindness practice closest to us in a way that we shouldn't have any trouble with. Traditionally, any loving-kindness practice will always start with ourselves. It will then be easy for us to generate the authentic emotion before extending it for the benefit of others. And once we've generated loving-kindness towards ourselves, we can extend this heartfelt feeling of loving-kindness more widely. If we were to characterize the sort of love that we're extending in terms of C.S. Lewis's Greek terminology for the 4 types of love, loving-kindness shares the components of all except eros. It has the elements of philia or filial love, storge or empathy bond, and agape, the unconditional love of the divine abidings. So what we do is extend forth loving-kindness while bringing to mind the words, may all beings be happy, may all beings in this room be happy, may all beings in this neighborhood be happy, may all beings in the country be happy, may all beings in the world be happy, and so forth, until we're extending loving-kindness universally and without exception, until we include all beings everywhere. Because the point of loving-kindness is that it's a very deep practice that can be an antidote to certain kinds of unskillful mental states, in particular emotional states of ill will, hatred, or anger. Overcoming the hindrance of ill will that would otherwise undermine our wisdom by spreading loving-kindness in all directions, abundantly, expansively, limitlessly, free of enmity or ill will. And through the practice of metta or loving-kindness meditation, little by little, we'll be able to shift the focus of the mind from something that's unskillful, that is anger or hatred, towards something that's skillful, that is kindness and love towards all beings. The more we practice, the easier it becomes, and the more it will make a difference in our lives. So we extend loving kindness in this way for a few moments more now in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. Sampe Buddha Balapata Bhatye Kananchayam Balang Arahantananchate Jena Rakam Bandami Sappaso Sappaputtanupavena Sappadhammanupavena Sappasanghanupavena Sathasoti Bhavanto Te. So if you like to slowly come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So, hope you are suitably chilled out after the meditation, both inside and outside. Well, we come to the time of the year when we are celebrating the final full moon of the year, meditating together for our centers around Europe. And we choose the full moon day as a special day to meditate because in the Eastern culture it's said that there's more spiritual energy around somehow to join together to do something spiritual, especially to do with meditation. And for this reason it's said to be a time when it's especially easy to do well in our meditation, perhaps more than at other times of the month. And actually the full moon is quite visible with the clear skies tonight as well. So I hope around Europe it is as clear as well. So full moon day is actually this December the 8th. And we are drawing towards the end of the year as well. So it makes a good opportunity to reflect and plan on the year that's passed by, and also think about the year that we are about to embark on for 2023 with our full moon energy in hand. Sometimes the full moon is given a special name at this time of the year, maybe not surprisingly the cold moon or the long night moon becomes the darkest and the coldest time of the year, in the northern hemisphere anyway, and the nights are particularly long, and we have the chance to see the full moon for a long time. And it also brings us close to the winter solstice as well, the shortest day of the year. But just as that will soon come to pass, and there will be longer days and warmer days ahead, then it's a time for us to think about the time for spiritual change, mull it over, and integrate it into plans and goals for the year ahead. So if there are any conclusions or realizations that we come to at the end of the year about what we've learned over the year that's passed by, then it's a good time to reflect on all those things. Sometimes full moons are said to be a symbol of the balance of opposing forces in our lives, pressures or circumstances. So it might be a time when we can think about those things with a deeper compassion for ourselves and for others, and to dig deeper for a balance between the two. So it might be a balance between logic and intuition, or it might be a balance between truth on a personal or collective level, or learning and knowing, home and family, or how we're splitting our time between the two, or whether we're neglecting a particular side of our lives. So we can see more clearly and learn from those things as we move forward to the new year ahead. The winter solstice comes on the 21st of December, and in the northern hemisphere again. And although the length of the day differs for different parts of the world, daylight time can be 9 hours long in New York, or it can be less than 6 hours if you're in Finland. But the actual word solstice comes from the Latin for the sun stands still, which has a special meaning if you have the sun inside yourself or the full moon inside yourself, also at a standstill for us meditators. But in many cultures it was a time of thinking about both death and rebirth at this time of the year, as they move into darkness and then back again. It's a time for Scandinavians to bring in their Yule log and to attract the sun's warmth back again for the spring months ahead. So it's a time of year when we can think about warmth gradually coming back. Although the main topic I'd like to think about in terms of hearth and fire and the warmth there is perhaps more in terms of our family warmth and well-being and shared compassion at this time of the year. Because although it's termed a festive season for many people, it's a time where issues of mental health can be particularly acute, maybe more so than at other times of the year. While the majority of people seem to be having their jolly ho-ho-ho time around the festive season, there's not an insignificant minority of people who are left feeling under the weather for various reasons. So for such people, it would seem that they aren't so much talking about celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah or Festivus these days, but rather surviving the festive season. So the main theme of the full moon this time round is looking at our sense of subjective well-being, in spite of the things that can come up as obstacles to that. So the 5 things which we need to make sure that we survive at this time of the year, whether it's uncertainty or maybe close contact with our families, or some people surviving a sense of loneliness or grief, or some people doing something as simple as surviving a lack of sleep. From the point of view of uncertainty, well, it's no longer the COVID so much. We seem to have a new agenda has taken its place. As the Grinch for stealing Christmas this year, in terms of train strikes and postal strikes and nurses strikes and university lecturer strikes, except no one really cares about those very much, I'm sure. Cost of living crisis, Strep A, and blackouts in various first world countries. And we may be worried about things like turkey shortage from avian flu outbreaks, or we might consider ourselves lucky that we get to worry about things like that instead of if you're in a Ukrainian city somewhere getting frostbite. Nonetheless, many of us appreciate the value of seeing our families in person, particularly old folks who we may have been out of contact with for some time without having to hide behind a mask. And if you're not feeling very positive about it at all, then it might be because you're lacking sunlight, or you can get your SAD lamp, your seasonal affective disorder lamp, to brighten yourself up with a little bit more vitamin D at this time of the year. It's also said to be good to get out in the fresh air, because your brain gets more serotonin that way, and oxygenate your brain more with oxytocin, which you also get from meeting up with friends as well. As for loneliness, if you have family to tolerate, then consider yourself lucky, because many people don't have that at this time of the year. They can feel loneliness particularly acutely. And you might think it refers just to elderly people, but in fact it's said that 1 in 10 adults between the ages of 25 and 34 feel loneliness at this time of the year quite acutely. And it might be a time where, in order to avoid dwelling on such things, if you do feel yourself vulnerable to that lonely feelings, is to plan things to read and eat and watch and exercise to keep yourself busy at this time of the year instead. Might also be a time to reach out to people who you know and keep in contact with others to help to manage those feelings as much as possible. Unfortunately, when we see the sort of idyllic depictions on TV or social media, then there's always a temptation to compare ourselves with all those pictures, and it may cause a lot of negative feelings that we are somehow less valuable or less lovable as a result. Loneliness can be particularly acute for those who have lost a loved one in the past year, especially if they're facing the festive season for the first year without that loved one. And it would be particularly hard to handle for a person who's grieving. And it may be time to pair up with people who you know who have gone through that sort of experience lately and help them to plan. It may be they simply don't want to be around at all for the festive season, in which case they might want to do something completely different this year, at this time of the year, like volunteering, perhaps in the soup kitchen, or going somewhere else, maybe more sunny, to have a completely different experience of this time of year. And some people also suffer from lack of sleep, maybe from waiting up too late for Santa Claus, I don't know. But sometimes it's just being thrown by a whole different sort of daily schedule at this time of the year. So you have to readapt your sleep patterns. And as for family, well, family are usually great, right? Everyone loves their close family. And preserve their sense of well-being at this time of the year. There's a lot of pressure to be the perfect family or to have perfect expectations. But if we are able to let go of some of that perfectionism to be with what we actually have, then maybe we're able to go deeper than just the material side of expensive gifts or thoughtful gifts or gifts that we show we understand the people who we are sharing with in our family. But there's always potential there for resentment if we're not careful. But it's probably useful to point out that Christmas is really not just about giving things to people in a material way. And in this respect, often we come back to the Buddhist wisdom tradition, which said there are 4 ways in which we can really cement the bonds of friendship with those around us. And only one of those has to do with giving gifts, which would be generosity on this particular slide. But also in the way we talk to others, the thoughtfulness of the way we speak to people, expressing compassion through the way we say things or what we say to people. It can be very important as well, especially for people who are feeling down or lacking encouragement, to find the right words at the right time for such people. And it can be a real pick-me-up for the people who are suffering or they're feeling forgotten or lonely or grieving. It can be particularly powerful as well. Also, going out of our way to help others might be something you could do toward those who are less fortunate than yourself during the festive season. Anyone who is short of people to cheer up might join us with our temple volunteering. At New Year, we usually go around to the York Road Project and also to the food banks to give something at this time of the year as well, because everyone tends to go at Christmas, so we go at New Year instead. And sometimes something we don't put a great deal of emphasis on, but sometimes just being there for a person, being available for a person, doesn't mean that you actually have to do anything very actively, but in a sense, being there and being what is expected, doing what's expected of you as a person, can be very powerful. Especially in times of uncertainty, when there's so much changing. If you can be the constant in a person's life, then it's a very valuable way that puts people's minds at rest. Because one way or another, people all have certain needs in life, no matter how wealthy or well provided they may be. The four things I've mentioned, whether it be resources or encouragement, strength or manpower in the form of a helping hand, or the security you give by being a person who others can trust, they all fill a gap in people's lives, which they may be lacking in one way or another. So, giving things, we help people with the resources they're lacking. A kindly speech may top up their sense of encouragement. Helpfulness may help them out when they're lacking strength or manpower. And the trustworthiness or being there for a person can add to their sense of security as well. So, it's said that if you can give any of these things, you find a place in people's hearts in a way that even if you go away, then people will think about you when you're gone, which really ought to be what the festive season boils down to when it's bringing people together, I would have thought. So from the point of view of our temple, towards the end of the year, we still have activities going on in the form of classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The last classes for the year will be on the 20th Tuesday and the 22nd Thursday of December. And after that there will be a break until the classes start up again on the 10th of January. There will be also the Saturday online meditation will take place, I think, until the Saturday before Christmas. And then there'll be a gap. It will pick up again afterwards to be announced. And over New Year, for those of you who have free time, you may be interested to join our informal meditation retreat between the 30th of December and the 2nd of January. You can pop in while staying at home for the sessions during the mid-morning and afternoon if you have time, or you might want to stay over as well. But there will be a sort of bilingual activities going on here with a sort of countdown with chanting and lucky dip and quite a lot of food and stuff as well as New Year's almsgiving as well. So it might be something you would like to look in on us for if you have free time over the New Year period. So for today, I think that's probably everything I wanted to say for you, apart from encouraging you to meditate and also to have happy holidays during this time. So if there's any questions, comments, or feedback at this time, then I'd be very pleased to hear from you. So may all of you enjoy happiness and harmony in your family lives, especially over the Christmas and festive season period. And may the year ahead lead you to ever greater and more uplifting things in your lives, both in worldly and spiritual ways now and forevermore.